All right, number one, what I'm about to do is exactly why small channels can't live stream anymore. Because everybody and their brother would be talking about what's about to happen, at least wise the people who are onto it. In my particular undisclosed profession, I am not allowed to idly sit by and pretend things are some other way than what I know they are. In other words, when I die, which could be very soon, I can't sit across the table from the man and say, I didn't know, or this wasn't my fight. So try and bear with me, because I'm going to do, for lack of a better term, a reaction video to Dave Hodges' recent live stream and try and maybe fill in the blanks for a few of you along the way, because we're running out of time. And unless you're able to understand what exactly is going on, you're not going to be able to respond to it properly. And that's why I'm making this video. It's not that I want to, I have to.
To UN troops on American soil. They've been here for a very long time. I have been documenting this forever and a day. Refer to the commonsenseshow.com when I have talked specifically about UN storehouses of their MRAPs in places like Hagerstown, Maryland. And I talked in the last Central American invasion about the UN interference in our border activities. So they've been here for a very, very long time, and this isn't anything that should really come as a shock to people. But when you are quoting sources, insider sources, deep cover sources, and they are telling you there are 750,000 to 1.2 million, when you're hearing those kinds of numbers, you have to take this seriously, but it's not surprising to me.
All right, this is the first time I'll break in. And taking the attitude that they should just be let in to do what they're here to do is so wrong, I couldn't even begin to explain it. Because letting someone take over your house and your life voluntarily, who's to say that any day after it'll ever be the same, or you'll ever have the opportunity to get it back or defend it ever again?
The other thing that I wanted to comment on too was the Marine Corps reservists that were called up. If you've seen the document that I alleged on the commonsenseshow.com in this morning's article, you will see in there that I linked to something called marine.mil, M-I-L, and then they went into the call-up, and they talked about how the call-up would work. It talked about all the statutes that apply, the Marine Corps policy numbers and so forth. But it also caught me off guard because it also said the Navy reservists and the Air Force reservists are also caught up in this. So this is a multi-branch call-up of reservists. This just isn't the Marine Corps. So here we got something flying around out here in the studio. But what we're looking at here, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that the military is being called up to, quote, to assist civilian authorities. Now, there's a debate going on right now in closed circles, and I can tell you at very high levels, there are people that I would like to see consistent and on the same page on this topic, and they are not. They're disagreeing. Some people think our military is or has been or is in the process of being commandeered by the bad guys. There certainly will be some of that. How do I know? Because when you take a look at what's going on at the Central American paramilitary-based training camps in places like El Salvador, I can tell you right now that you've got Army personnel down there training terrorists and cartel members as one unified army how to invade the United States. And you're saying U.S. Army? Well, U.S. Army that works for the CIA, yes.
And I'll tell you from personal experience, There's positive and negative in everything. Don't for one second don't think that there aren't branches of our government, our military, our police forces, and or our government that haven't been corrupted. And don't for a second think that there's branches of the military, our police forces, our government, and so on that haven't. There are people out there that honestly want to do their jobs and will not be corrupted in any way, shape, or form. Believe it or not.
Did the Army work for the CIA? No. And not all the CIA is corrupt. So you have to understand you're dealing with rogue individuals, rogue groups, special groups that are farmed out, and they're paid to the highest bidder. And then we could do show after show on the compartmentalization of our intelligence agencies. Some of them serve their true purpose towards the American people, and some of them serve a, shall I say, lower order, if you know what I mean, like lower order. Exactly. Ladies and gentlemen, when we look at the call up of these military, the one thing I do know for certain, and I think you can take this to the bank, the one thing that is absolutely true is most of the men and women that serve in the U.S. military will not betray you and me. Some will. Do you remember back in the 90s when they had the infamous 29 Palms questionnaire that went out to officers? Would you fire on American citizens if ordered to do so? Do you remember that? And that still kind of makes the rounds, and you can find that online. And I will tell you this, I don't know the percentages, but well over half of American soldiers will not fire on American citizens in an unprovoked situation. That's not going to happen. I think some branches of the military are more loyal than others. I don't think. I know. One of the branches of the military that was able to stay totally independent of the Obama administration was the submarine fleet. Obama tried and tried and tried to turn that into, shall we say, a less than loyal branch of the Navy, thus a less than loyal Navy to the American people.
And we all witnessed that happen during the Obama administration. Generals were removed, scandals were cooked up across the military, all in an effort to remove people in the upper echelons of the military and intelligence agencies, for that fact, who were loyal to their oath to the Constitution, and be replaced with people who were more loyal or easily pliable to what I have called the New World Order system.
Was not successful. And recall, I'm referring to the purge in which Obama fired almost 400 senior command officers who were conservative, loved God, went to church, believed in the Constitution. He had to get rid of those and replace them with people who were a little more cooperative to his point of view. But back to the point. You've got the UN troops here, and I can tell you right now, I counted before I came on air. I have reports of UN troops from 17 different states. I didn't need Steve Quayle's information to come to this conclusion, but Steve's information really kind of pulled it all together. But I'm not the only one that has this. Most of us in the independent media who are daring to look at this, there are some in the independent media right now that are afraid to touch this. They're afraid to lose credibility because the public won't believe them. They're afraid of the consequences for speaking out. They don't want the midnight visits to their home that threatens them and their families. This is all a reality.
And that's another aspect of why shadow banning has been instituted, limited state, and all of the things that we see on the social media companies, because there are people who refuse to back away.
Those who have the courage to step up and look at this issue already know that this is going on. Already know. And I've repeated some of their names yesterday, and I'm so confident going forward. But 17 separate reports, photos are coming in. The problem is we're talking amateurs in the field that aren't taking photos where you can really see shall we say, huge UN markings. And many times these suspicious trucks, MRAPs, they're unmarked. And I'll tell you, if you want to confuse the public and hide what you're doing, that's exactly what I would do. Do you remember it was last year when the UN had vehicles outside Rawlins, Wyoming that were bolted down, and they had special antenna that were EMP proof and they could still communicate after an EMP attack? Well, that was brought to Paul Martin, those photos in person, and sent to me at exactly the same time, probably by the same person, about these trucks. And these trucks have been witnessed by people on the ground. They were unmarked, although they were UN-style vehicles. That's how we knew what they were. They're here. And these reports were getting across the country. I had a guy from the 3 Percenters in Texas, for example, tell me we're seeing them everywhere across Texas. What's concerning to me, and I was talking to some of my friends in the independent media about this today, is that this isn't exploding on Twitter. It should be.
Oh, yeah.
This should be the most explosive topic that's out there right now. But under the cover of impeachment, I think they're able to keep this largely under wraps. Here's what we have to wonder. This is the $64 million question. These reservists being called up and the already good men and women in the military, are they going to protect you and me from these people? Or are they going to join them?
All right. Don't count on it. Is it possible that they will come to our defense? Entirely. More than likely, as a matter of fact. But in the end, you're responsible for what happens to you and yours. You're responsible for what happens on your block. If someone's being dragged out into the street down the road from you, what does it say about you as a person when you have to answer to the man if you don't do anything? If you just sit idly by and say, well, that doesn't concern me. Because who knows? They might be coming to your house next.
That's a good question, isn't it?
Ain't it?
My feeling is there could be a bifurcation in our military. And let me tell you why I believe this. This isn't idle speculation. If you go back to Jade Helm 16, and you may want to go back and review everything I wrote in that period, Jade Helm 16 was Jade Helm 2. And it was still in the Obama years, so we have to keep that in mind as an overarching principle behind what they were trying to accomplish in this drill. But there was an ad that appeared on Craigslist, and I published it on thecommonsenseshow.com. It was advertising for $18 an hour employees that would come in and play ex-U.S. military that were disaffected, that's a quote, and they were now guerrilla chieftains. Well, you know what this implies. When you put those terms together, I'll put it in plain language. They were people that once were in our military, and obviously they're now not in the military, but they're engaged in paramilitary activities in the form of guerrilla warfare, guerrilla chieftain. In other words, this was the American modern-day version of practicing against the American version of the Viet Cong. That's what, I recognized what it was instantly. And I will tell you this, if you think the Viet Cong was a thorn in the American military side, and they were able to prevent complete subjugation, you ain't seen nothing till you talk about what could happen with disaffected military people, and what also could happen with regard to our 7 million veterans of fighting age. And let's back up to the Obama administration. Why in the world do you think they were so gung-ho on giving them PTSD diagnoses when they were leaving the military? Because this was used as the basis to deny gun ownership. So you're in Afghanistan, oh yeah, you must have PTSD, therefore, oh, you can't own a gun. They were trying to disarm that 7 million man force. The Viet Cong never had anything like this. This is something that I look at and I'm highly encouraged by, but I'm also disturbed by it. My hope is the UN will stand down because they see this mobilization by Trump, by activating the reservists, is something that says, we know you're here, we know what you're doing, and we're going to take action against you. And what do I think is going to end up happening?
Trump actually mentioned that tonight in an interview with Judge Jeanine Pirro on Fox. We need our troops home because they're going to have to defend the homeland. He literally said that. So that means that we're that close, or they're that close, to actually following through with the plans that they had for America instituted under Hillary Clinton. I've said this before in many videos. It was her job to finish off America, stab us in the back, and enter us into the system that they have been trying to build outside of our Constitution.
Yeah. I'm hoping the UN will back down. By the way, the UN has been backed down before. During the Central American immigration crisis, the previous one, not the current one, they wanted to take over all border activities, and they were the ones that were facilitating the entry of MS-13 into the country, the assassins for the cartels. And the Border Patrol was livid about this action.
It's getting hot in here.
Well, they were made to back down. Jim Bridenstine, for example, a congressman from Oklahoma, tried to go to Fort Sill, and he wanted to investigate who really is in there and what they're up to. And DHS, that was being compromised by the UN at that level, turned him away. Said, you come back in a few weeks after you make an appointment. Can you imagine that? A congressman being turned away from a U.S. military base because of some clandestine activities going on inside? Well, it was all UN-oriented. Well, Bridenstine went nuts. Some of the people connected to his group, and I'm not going to be more specific, started leaking people like myself information. And we went nuts, and we think we backed these people up with exposure, and we prevented a UN takeover, a total takeover of border activities. And you notice Ocasio-Cortez in recent days, what has she been saying? What's Presley been saying? What's the whole squad been saying? We want the UN to come in. And let me just remind you that there's historical precedent.
And as I've said in previous videos, for the most part, all those freshman congressmen who they call the squad are globalist mouthpieces put in there by the previous establishment to sway the young people into getting behind their agenda.
Telling you the UN is here. Cook County, Chicago, 75 shootings in a weekend. And the Cook County commissioners, and I know they were prompted to do this, wanted to bring in the UN. Do you recall that? And they could do so under the Kigali principles. And I'm going to say Kigali, Kigali, Kigali until I have no more breath to speak, because you need to know what's behind this. They were going to bring under the Kigali principles, which the UN says they have the right to come in with 29 signatory nations and overtake whatever resistance, civil conflict, whatever's going on in their version and restore that country or put that country in the way that they want it. It's an invasion. It's an excuse to invade. And Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry signed us on to this agreement as the 29th signatory in December of 2016 after the election and before the inauguration of Donald Trump. They were already planning for this UN invasion at that point in time. That was exactly the purpose. And the Cook County commissioners tried to get it done behind the scenes. The Trump people backed it. They threatened them with sedition and they backed down. Well, they're back and they're here. And there's no mistaking the fact that they're here. Will our military protect us? I've talked to people about this ad nauseum for not just today, but for years I've talked about this. 10 years ago, I'd have said 90% of the military will give the UN the big middle finger and follow it up with live round ammunition. Today, I think that number is probably less. How much less, I don't know. And I think some agencies are going to be more loyal to the Constitution of the American people than other branches of the government. There's also going to be interagency conflict. You've heard me make this statement.
When you enter the military or government service, for that fact, you take an oath to uphold the laws and principles of the Constitution. And to violate that oath is a serious offense. What some people fail to understand, when you raise your hand and take that oath, it doesn't necessarily mean that job is over or the oath is null and void just because you're no longer in service.
As a senior federal law enforcement agent recently told me, I can't trust anyone above a GS-15 because they don't serve the Constitution, they don't serve the American people. In fact, he went on to say, we know where the ISIS base camps are in this country. We know where the child sex factories are, and we're prevented from doing our job. This is all part of the same mentality. This is all part of the people who are bringing you these UN troops are now also bringing you these kind of rogue officials in DHS, and this is what we mean by the deep state, because since the days of Bush, and Bush is no better than Obama, well, you say, okay, that's not true. Really? How about Patriot Act 1 and 2, where everything you do online, everything you do with your phone, every email you send, all the voice encryption they do of you to identify when you're speaking in earshot of a phone that's always on passive surveillance, could be someone else's phone.
And he's exactly right. Up until 2016, and it should be fairly obvious the way they reacted to Donald Trump's election, they were all in bed together. One side of the coin was literally no different than the other. And people have that so ingrained in their heads that they don't believe or won't acknowledge what's been unfolding right before their very eyes ever since Donald Trump was elected president.
Spying on you, and they're categorizing you, and they're creating red list, blue list, green list, to quote my friend Steve Quayle. Where do you think this comes from? It came from the Patriot Act 1 and 2. Totally illegal. These FISA courts, and we can arrest you without a warrant. And then Obama brought in the NDAA, which you could snatch someone off the street because we'll just call them an enemy combatant. See, you can be declared an enemy combatant, and you go, wait a minute, I'm loyal to the Constitution. Oh, no, you're just an enemy combatant because you're not loyal to the people taking over the government.
Yep.
See, this is what you need to be worried about. And see, Obama and Bush did this.
And that's why I was told over 30 years ago, son, you can forget about your patriotism in the future. That'll only make you the enemy. So be it.
Legislatively. So don't give me this crap that Bush was a Republican and a lot different than the Democrats. They were serving the same masters. And let me remind you, who was president when 9/11 happened? And the evidence is still locked up at Hangar 17, and we're not allowed to look at it like we're little children that can't handle the truth. And we paid for this investigation. We'd like to have our own independent sources go in and look at it. And who put that there? Exactly. It was the Bush administration. So don't give me this stuff that the Bushes are fine. They're not fine. They're not. We know Daddy Bush was as corrupt as the day was long. We know about his involvement with the Kennedy assassination. But his idiot son, the cocaine user from Yale, who they tried to rehabilitate with a pro sports ownership, going through the whole 9 yards, the draft dodger, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, all that stuff we know is true about George W. And they tried to rehabilitate his image, made him Texas governor, handed him New World Order legislation, the TMAP. Remember the TMAP? Oh, you don't know? Texas know about this. Yeah, that caused your drug prescription prices to go through the roof. He was a servant to Eli Lilly and the pharmaceuticals. And how do I know? Because when he was running for office, Eli Lilly gave him $2 million for his campaign. He was a sellout to the globalists, and he continued that sellout by no investigation in 9/11, not reining in Dick Cheney, and we know how rogue Dick Cheney was. And we could go on and on and on, and we land on the square of what? Patriot Act 2, and then Obama. Do we need to say any more? And it was supposed to be Hillary Clinton next. Let me make a baseball analogy, okay? The globalists were winning.
Listen closely here, because I've mentioned this before. And just listen.
And Obama was the eighth inning setup guy. He came in to put down the opposition and hold the lead in the eighth inning. And the ninth inning is when you bring in your closer, your Mariano Rivera, probably the best closer in all of baseball history. And that closer was to close the deal on American liberty forever. And who was the closer? It was supposed to have been Hillary Clinton. But an amazing thing happened on the way to the 2016 election. Enough Americans woke up, and they woke up enough of the rest of the country that no amount of voter fraud could steal that election. And this is why they're in a tizzy. This is why day after day it's Trump did this, Trump did that, Trump, 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 Trump. Impeach, impeach, impeach.
Because they're afraid that he's going to expose what they were trying to do. And they're right. But the reason this has been played out like a game is to try and save as many lives as possible along the way. Because as someone else has stated along the way, this isn't a game. This is quite literally for all the marbles. To quote a recent video of mine, the title at least, it's freedom or bust. And you better decide what side you're on.
Russia, now it's Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. It's never going to end. Why? Because he's not supposed to be there. It wasn't part of the plan. He ruined the setup of Hillary Clinton. And now they got a big problem. Stay with me, folks, because this is going right back to the central point. So Hillary Clinton's going to run. There's no question. That's if we get to the election before we have violence.
Another thing
but
I've
Hillary
mentioned.
Clinton is going to re-enter the race. She can't win. This is why they have to move on Trump. They're either going to take him down illegitimately through false impeachment proceedings based on no crime. And you say, wait a minute, a crime? He committed a crime. It's real clear, Dave, that he gave criminal information and asked for such from the Ukraine president. By the way, we have an agreement with Ukraine from 1999 that says we'll share criminal information. In addition, every nation in the world shares criminal information and asks for criminal investigations from each other. This is something that is pointed, germane, and perfectly legal. It's not even a crime. And Trump knows this. He thumbed his nose at these bastards 2 days ago when he started implicating Biden in Chinese difficulties. In other words, crimes and so forth. Because he can. It's legal. But they got to get him out because he's not the closer that they wanted to usher in the New World Order. Take your Constitution away from you. And by the way, what's your Constitution?
And if he was, he wouldn't be building the wall. He wouldn't be changing the trade policies that have been selling out this country for years and years. You all right over there?
Put your Bill of Rights. How about the right of freedom of speech? How about, if you're a Christian, soon to be gone, the right to worship as you please? Those are two real important issues here in the Constitution. And then we get into Second Amendment. Oh, if you don't like what we're doing to us, you're not going to be able to defend yourself because we're going to take all your guns. And then we've got illegal search and seizure. You know, the Nazi Gestapo of the left, if they ever take over, can show up at your house any day, time of the day or night, like they did with the East German Stasi, like they did with the KGB, and like they did with the Nazis and the Gestapo. The same thing. Fourth Amendment, gone. Fifth Amendment, due process. Well, wait a minute now. The NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act of 2011, basically says, as I said, you can snatch people off the street, hold them incommunicado, you can use hearsay evidence against them. We've heard this before recently with Adam Shifty Schiff. You can do all these things outside the Fifth Amendment due process now. This is Nazi Germany stuff. The NDAA is Nazi Germany. We'll snatch you off the street because we don't like you.
And here's another point that I've made several times in the past. These people suck at original ideas. So they keep dragging up stuff from the past, trying to reintroduce it and make it work. What's the definition of insanity? Keep doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result.
Put you in a deep dark hole and no one will know. You don't get your phone call. You don't get legal representation. We can kill you. No one will even know. That's the NDAA. Well, you can thank Barack Obama for that. And how about Executive Order 13603? That if these people get control of the government, it's still out there. What's 13603? Forced conscription into labor camps, i.e. labor FEMA camps. You know that's what they did to the majority of the Jews in Nazi Germany? Did you know that? They would put them on a calorie count. So here you have a job, you're going to build engines for Messerschmitts.
They worked them to death.
On the other hand,
and when they weren't useful anymore, they got rid of them.
Where you become malnourished and die. But we're going to get as maximum amount of labor out of you as we can. That was one of the strategies. Everybody thinks the death camps were all about, okay, we're going to take you to the showers and turn on the poison gas, and they carry the bodies out and burn them in the crematoriums. That happened in large numbers. But what also happened is what I just described. This is what's in Executive Order 13603. Go look it up. You say, Dave, I don't have the time to go find it. Okay, I'll make it easy. Go to thecommonsenseshow.com, go to the search engine, upper right-hand corner, and put in Executive Order 13603, and you'll get this long, long list, because I've broken it down in so many different ways, and it's not just labor slavery. It's not just that. They can come in, they can commandeer any resource that's your own. They can take over all businesses. They can take over all food production, water distribution. They can control every aspect of your life. Executive Order 13603. This is what Hillary Clinton would have had the statutory authority to act upon. Now, if Congress really gave a crap about you, they would have declared this to be wrong and passed a law against it. The Supreme Court would have declared this to be unconstitutional, and they didn't. It is telling what you heard is not unconstitutional. But go read the act for yourself. Don't take my word for it. That's where we're coming to this nexus. Now, because the liberals, and that's a nice word for them, cannot win the next election, this is why you're seeing UN troops. And they could be blustering. And you go, what do you mean by that? Well, there's UN troops that would prepare to go to war, and there could be the UN troops letting their presence be known as an intimidation factor, but not really a military, we're going to attack you factor. And it could be, and there's two schools of thought on this, and I'll tell you which one I fall down on. One school of thought says the activation of the reservists is the middle finger to the UN and say, okay, you made one move, checkmate. We just made a move to counter you. The other thinking is, and there are people that believe this, and I had a debate today with a dear friend of mine in the independent media, and this person believes that the majority of the military leadership will sell us out, and they're aligning with UN persecution of U.S. citizens. I don't believe the latter. I believe the former. I believe in the people, the men and women that serve in our military. But this is where we're at today. This is a very, very serious situation. And my hope, ladies and gentlemen, is that you're prepped. You're prepped. Are you prepped? I hope so.
Me too.
This is why there's a couple of products that I'll allude to here. One of them in particular, preparewithdave.com. It starts with storable food. And we'll leave it there, but it's 25-year shelf life, no GMOs, no glyphosates. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I like the food. The food tastes good. If you're not fully prepped food-wise, my wife and I did the inventory last night because I said things are getting serious. I said, this may be intimidation moves and we're not going to see any action out of it, and there's not going to be fighting in the streets with our children at our feet, to basically paraphrase a Who song. We may not see that, but I'm taking it seriously as if we could. So I've done an inventory on my food, and I would say I probably need to get maybe about 3 more months. So I'm in the process of doing that right now. And I would encourage you to do that, preparewithdave.com, and you're not going to get a better deal out there. Otherwise, I'd be advertising for the better deal.
And here's something a lot of people don't take into account. It's the corporations that are in bed with all of this because they stand to be able to maintain their monopolies in this system. And in a free market system, that isn't guaranteed. So, in order to protect themselves and their bottom line, the majority of them, or so it would appear, have thrown their support and their hat in the ring with the globalists. That's why you see organizations like the NBA bending their knee to China.
I've given you a lot to chew on. I've given you a lot of history, but I wanted to tie it all together. And we've cracked open the nut, and the entire shell has not disappeared. We're going to continue to get information that we're going to make available to you here on the Common Sense Show. We're going to be back here in a few minutes after I get to organize on new information coming in regarding the motivation behind what Trump is doing with Biden. And this is really, really interesting to me, and we're going to come back and talk about that, and then we're going to close out the evening talking about fundraising. This has been really good for Trump, and we're going to talk about what it means for the 2020 election should such an event take place. Anyway, again, thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the Common Sense Show, I would really encourage you to do that, because you'll get notifications in most cases that we're either live or that we're producing something. And we generally post to our YouTube channel about every 2 hours between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. Pacific time. So that would be 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the East Coast. Again, God bless all of you for joining us. And I thought before we go, I'd take a minute.
All right. I've never been to the commonsenseshow.com website. I have heard some of Dave Hodges' segments on YouTube, but I'm not even subscribed to his channel. However, he breaks all of this down in a lot more convincing manner, apparently, than I have, because I have talked about all of this stuff along the way over the past year or two, in some way, shape, or form or another. So I will finish up and talk about something that Dave was going to cover in his next segment, seeing as how this is going pretty long and most people probably aren't going to be able to hang with it. Joe Biden. As I have said before, this is like a huge fishing knot balled up on top of your reel. And if you pick at it just right and pull at it just right and study the knot as you're working on it, eventually you get to a point when you pull on it and it all comes undone. And that's what they have decided to do with Joe Biden. Because once the Ukraine connection is made and the corruption connection with him taking money from the Chinese government, it all starts to come undone. And you can backtrack it forward or backwards. Because everybody's going to want to know, or should want to know, what the hell is going on. Because it affects your life. It affects the people around you. It affects the people who aren't even born yet. That's why I have called this, and will continue to call this, the best show ever made. Better than any football game, better than any race, better than any basketball game ever dreamed of being. And it's all on the line. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, it's freedom or bust. And you better be prepared to decide what side you're on and how you're going to respond to it. Because the alternative and what the other side has planned for us, the people of the world and or the American people, isn't acceptable. It isn't livable. And in the long term, it isn't survivable. Because if it's allowed to continue, we all know where it's going to go. So these times have been foretold. And we all know how it ends up. And just because it's been prophesized doesn't mean it has to happen in this time. Our whole existence is based on free will. And if we decide to give that to someone else or allow it to be taken from us, prophecy will be fulfilled. Because free will is the cornerstone of what God wanted this world to be. Take care.